Okay, friends, welcome back to another episode of Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore, coming at you from a new camera angle since I reorganized all my stuff. But anyways, we have kind of a serious topic for today. I shouldn't be too full of jokes because I wanted to discuss how Russians are reacting to the situation in Texas and why Putin does not support any sort of Texas revolution. You might be surprised by that, but it's my personal belief that I don't think that he would, because he's true Russian politician, and I'll explain that. So, on the side of like common people, and maybe if you're in America right now, or who knows where you are, but you're listening in English, aren't you? You might be surprised that the whole situation in Texas, if you think it's hot on American social media, it is just as hot on Russian social media. From the moment that Governor Abbott said to Biden, nope, I'm going to protect the borders, come hell or high water, that's my rights, everyone within Russia has been equating this to sort of like the American Donbass, the great uprising. And I've even posted pictures how like within the very same day that this was stated, there were already graphics of Russian and Texan forces, drawings, marching, arm in arm. And yeah, so I'll put it this way. For Russian people who've seen a lot of, let's just say, interference in their development by the United States, and after experiencing the horrors of the breakup of the Soviet Union, there's a bit of a sort of, would Schadenfreude be the proper term? For seeing potentially that thing happen, the very same set of horrific events happen in the United States. So there's a bit of a dark side, but there's also a bit of a positive side where, which I would say is maybe even the majority side of people in Russia see it as this moment of optimism. Like, look at this, the American people are taking back their country from the evil forces that create wars across the planet and did COVID and did this, that, and this other, and they're responsible for all the stuff in Gaza. This is great. You go, guys. So I would say that's probably the more majority position, is not filled with Schadenfreude. But anyways, so the public has definitely, let's just say the Russian public has definitely come out on the side of Texas. Maybe that's surprising to you, or maybe that's not surprising whatsoever. Now, why would Putin, now Medvedev is another story. We'll get to Medvedev. But let me, before I forget, say why Putin wouldn't. Because Russians really like predictability and things, especially related to like business and all that, and even related to politics. Russian politicians and people who wear suits who have a lot of power, they like things to be nice and boring and predictable. Maybe you've heard me complain on this channel about why Russian business can be very frustrating, because Russian business people don't like risk at all. They do not like venture capital. I think the word venture is even scary. They like guaranteed results capital. They want to put $1 million into something to get a million to 200,000 back within a couple of months. That's the way that they do business. They like that predictability. In fact, there's sort of an urban legend, which may or may not be true, that during the gasoline and fuel crisis of the late 1970s. I believe that was during Carter's administration in the United States. A little bit before I was born, guys, so please forgive me. I'm bad on the years. But during that actually was a pretty dangerous moment for the United States during the Cold War. And at that time, this was before the 80s. So the Soviet Union wasn't quite really on its knees. I think this was still, maybe Brezhnev was still alive, or maybe he had, this was that weird transitional period where Andropov was in power or whatever. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The Soviet Union was still in good shape at the moment. And there's a belief that if the Soviets wanted to, they really probably could have put the nail in the American coffin, but they didn't. Why? Because managing the crisis that would follow in a global economic collapse would be worse than just keeping the Cold War going. And I think that could be what the way that Putin actually would see some sort of internal crisis in the United States, of being like, well, the United States has kind of proved itself to be our eternal enemy, but it's kind of become this eternal enemy that has this weird woke ideology where it's kind of constantly shooting itself in the foot. And we've kind of begun to sort of analyze, we kind of know how it behaves, and we've come to understand its modus operandi and all this other stuff. What if there was a civil war there? There's so many nuclear weapons there. Who knows who'd get them? Well, what would happen during that civil war? What if the pretty people that come to power next are crazy or really, really naive. It basically, it's essentially a sort of Russian pessimism of going from bad situation is much better than unknown situation. That's kind of the way that they look at it. So, guys, although I think you've probably seen some memes that maybe somehow Putin is secretly behind the events in Texas, it's definitely not Putin. It is definitely not him. Because he definitely, and if you look at the way he's led the country, this very more incremental, not taking risks, not going out on a limb, never doing anything crazy, liking predictable outcomes, he is definitely Russian businessman in terms of like the way that he does stuff. Now, his sort of antithesis, his opposite. I don't know, brain's not working, guys. His sort of opposite there, and the man who I personally believe has sort of taken over the role of Vladimir Zhirinovsky. If you remember, maybe you've even seen in English the memes where the one Russian politician, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, has almost become referred to as being prophetic because so many of the stuff that he said in kind of a crazy tone filled with anger on television, actually have kind of all come true. Maybe not all, but then again, it's one of those things where if you make enough predictions, some of them will come right. But anyways, the reliability of the prophecy of Vladimir Zhirinovsky is maybe a topic for another day, but he's starting to become viewed as being prophetic, and he was always the person who had that position within the Russian government of more of the punch them in the face, if they mess with us, they'll pay, that kind of more aggressive rhetoric. And so what did he do? I think he sort of represented maybe the outskirts of the Overton window. There's kind of like, the Overton window is this idea that there's this sort of blob of acceptable ideas. There's sort of an edge of that blob, which would become like edgy or edge of the window. And then stuff that's outside the window are unacceptable ideas or blasphemous things that we don't talk about or acknowledge. And the Overton window can sort of move around, right? And so, the things that were socially acceptable to say in 1950s America and were blasphemous in 1950s America have almost become the opposite now, in a lot of ways, right? So the Overton window has shifted in terms of the American public consciousness and what is nice to say in public. But I think Zhirinovsky always represented that sort of frame of the Overton window of being right on the edge, of being sort of the harshest, sometimes, Russian political opinions that were just barely acceptable to say in public. And I think that's what Medvedev is doing now. Because unlike Putin, Medvedev has... again, seems to be fulfilling this role of being the edge of that Overton window. And he sort of recently said something to the effect of like, oh, there's a Texas uprising? Good. So I think that Medvedev does sort of represent a minority second or third tier opinion that can't be ignored. But all the opinions that Medvedev expresses, conversely, I think really represent something of kind of like a warning position, like if you do this and this, then this will become our position in the future, or the position of only like the most sort of hardline people who don't really represent President Putin. So, guys, with this whole Texas thing, with the whole Texas v. Putin thing, again, I don't think that Putin supports this. Medvedev is sort of playing his role, and in his role as being the new Zhirinovsky, who has to be hardcore and in your face, sort of almost being like a non-corrupt Lindsey Graham or John McCain. Well, you could kind of see that his answer is pretty much par for the course. And again, I'd just like to reiterate that overwhelmingly, there's a lot of support from the Russian masses for Texas, and the overwhelming majority of that is doing so out of a pure position of wanting the things to be better for the average American. The Schadenfreude kind of crew that wants to see America suffer what Russia had to suffer in 1991. That is definitely a minority position. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that. Again, I don't think that Putin wants to see the United States boil down into some horrible chaos, especially a chaos where there's a lot of nuclear missiles in the United States. And yeah, that would not be good. That would not be good. And especially, guys, because remember, if there was a pure chaos and a total like apocalyptic, an apocalyptic breakdown of American society or something, then those Mexican drug cartels, they're gonna, let's put it this way, their area of influence is gonna get much bigger, and their attitude towards selling nuclear weapons or all sorts of different weapons and this, that, and the other, they're in it for the money, friends. So yeah, it could be a real dire situation. And that's why I think, again, Putin is against this, but again, the Russian masses who are more emotional and kind of naive are for this. So anyways, Tim Kirby Russia signing out.